Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited to welcome all of you to the San Diego Museum of Art. My name is Anita Feldman. I'm the Deputy Director for Curatorial Affairs and Education. I'm also the curator of the Tim Shaw exhibition, and I hope you all had a chance to see that. If you haven't yet seen it, please come back and check it out. One note is that it's free for students on Fridays, or at least the museum is. I think there's a small upcharge for the exhibition, not very much, but on Fridays between 5 and 8 o'clock, we have extended hours, and the museum is free for all university and college students. We're really trying to extend our reach to the universities, and this initiative is part of that. And I'd really like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you from San Diego State University, faculty and staff, and students. I'm very glad also to see our members here tonight, and members of the Contemporary Art Committee that supports contemporary art initiatives here in the museum. Tonight's event is a conversation with Nick Cave. I'm very, very happy to welcome him here tonight. And I'd like to just say, too, that there's something really interesting going on with contemporary artists who are mixing things up, you know, and having just opened the Tim Shaw exhibition, he's an artist that works with textiles, he works with performance spaces, he works with artificial intelligence. He recreates a childhood trauma of a memory when he was in a cafe that exploded in Belfast during Bloody Friday in 1972. These are challenging and dark works. They make us think about what it means to be human, what it means to explore these darker sides of humanity, and what's happening in the world today in terms of terrorism, in terms of abuse of power and freedom of speech, the suppression of journalism. These are really important ideas that are confronted in the exhibition. And so I encourage all of you to have a look at that. But one thing that unites Tim Shaw and Nick Cave is that they are both artists who defy traditional expectations of what it means to be a sculptor. You know, they're both mixing up media. It's not specifically what you would call sculpture. It's not specifically dance or performance, but it's a mixture of all of these things: sound, fabric, social commentary. And these are really thought-provoking ways of approaching art and changing our definitions of these subjects. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome, excuse me, Donna Connerty, the Interim Dean of the College of Professional Studies and Fine Arts from San Diego State University. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you so much, Anita. It's really exciting to have this partnership, this project happen tonight and actually throughout the semester. I especially want to recognize a vision and now the realization of that vision on the part of someone who really was instrumental in making this happen. That's Michelle Schlecht, who's sitting right here. And with her support, students and faculty in the School of Art and Design at San Diego State University have been working with Nick through this wonderful technology that we have now and the internet and Skype and things like that, to actually learn about his artistic visions, his processes. And so our dance students and art students are working together on projects that will culminate in their own individual artistic expression on December 10th at 6 p.m. on the San Diego State University campus. So I hope that after tonight you're inspired to, after hearing what he has to say and learning more about Nick's work, to come back and see how he has influenced our students in what they're doing. And so these students are really working on, just as Anita was saying, talking about media, exploring different types of media, finding their own artistic vision, and also being very engaged in considering life as we know it right now in 2018, which after all, that's what art does. It expresses and reflects back to us what we are experiencing as human beings in the time in which we live. Many of you are, of course, familiar with Nick's work, especially the Soundsuits, and so we're about to be treated to a video that explores the process, highlights the ceremonial dressing of a performer. You'll witness the layering and constructing of a suit from its elemental beginning stages. And somber and introspective, I guess, would be a way to characterize this video. It's about 20 minutes long, and it has hopefully a transformative quality for you, both for the actors and for the ones you'll see on the video, and also for yourselves in viewing it. So I'd like to introduce this video.
are complete.
You're complete. You're complete. You are complete.
I can see
That was pretty spectacular. Amazing, amazing work. It's my pleasure now to welcome and bring up to the stage Edward Goldman. And for more than 30 years, he has been an art critic and host of Art Talk on National Public Radio. Through the Otis College of Art and Design, he is teacher and leads a seminar on art collecting, engaging his students and fellow art lovers in informal and spirited conversations about art and culture. So who better than to join us this evening? And he will be leading tonight's conversation with Nick Cave. Would you please join me in welcoming him?
So how to introduce this artist? As a sculptor, as a filmmaker, as a dancer, I think as a magician. Probably that would be the best introduction. So magician Nick Cave, join me.
Hi.
So we have about 30 minutes for our conversation, and after that, 10-15 minutes for the Q&A. So we already started conversation in the green room. So
We did.
we did, yes. Nick, it's the first time that I guess for most of the people, including myself, that we see you face to face. I had the pleasure, and probably some of the people in the audience have seen your exhibition, the only museum exhibition in Southern California at UCLA Fowler Museum. It's a small but very adventurous museum which introduced Californians to El Anatsui, works about 10 years ago, to your work. And I knew nothing about you. I've seen these dancing costumes, and I was totally intrigued, and I brought class of people who go on my seminars for art collectors. It's not just people buying art, just pushing buttons to see art, which adventurous, which complicated, which might be even upsetting, which might be pushing buttons. And your art been doing to the audience all above. And I prepared myself a little bit. I read some articles about you, but I know that you started as a dancer with Alvin Ailey Company. So you've been trained as a dancer and you've been performing on the stage, am I right?
Not exactly.
So,
I started as an artist first. I was really sort of both undergrad. I was doing sort of a double major, so it was dance and it was fine art.
and how much dance in experience being dancer? Because dancer, first of all, is a discipline. Discipline on your body, it's a rhythm, everything that you see, because these dancers are not just showing your costumes, they move in particular rhythm. I can almost hear the music in the background. So how much dance shaped your artistic vision?
I don't know if it was really dance that shaped it as opposed to movement, which I think is two different things. For me, I don't know, I find movement to be more sort of, it's more liberating, more independent, more experimental. And I find that the costumes, the costumes are, they're sculptures, but the costumes, they may have limitations and restrictions built within them. And so it really sort of forces you to renegotiate the role of the body and its limitations based on the wearer.
I have to admit that seeing this documentary, I experienced for the first time your sculptures in movement, the way you want to present them. But I have to admit that I prefer to see them silent, and I know that, and I want to imagine them moving in my way, not somehow seeing your sculptures in the museum and learning about them. I start imagine and fantasize, any artworks which allow visitor or viewer to step in and to interpret it in their own way, for me makes particularly lasting impression. But here, seeing it for the first time, I don't know how many people would agree with me in the audience. If next time I will introduce you, not as a sculptor, not a dancer, but a painter, because each soft piece of the fabric, and what material, most of that? It's a synthetic material?
Well, it was hair, it was synthetic raffia, it was other sort of objects that were made as
You know,
well.
when I see all your assistants moving brushes along that, I start to think about that. This is a painting, and each of the element of your costume is a brush stroke, yet another brush stroke, yet another brush strokes. I think that maybe no one told you, now I'm telling you. You are the painter, first of all, and most of all, and everything else coming out of this. It's a sensational paintbrush, and we talked about this in the green room, that seeing that and looking at some of the catalogs which I got before I met with you, give me a sensation that you allow people during your exhibitions, even the way your catalogs designed, it's not just proper information, nothing wrong about proper information. It's just you allow people to enter your imagination, a little bit crazy imagination, very poetic imagination, and it seems to me that, I told you about that, it's like being in a wonderful restaurant and enjoying tremendously good food, properly prepared, and after that someone, because they know people, take you to the kitchen and you see the chef and you see how it's done. So this performance that you allow us to see make me feel that we not only look at your works, we are getting intimate, particular experience, and probably a lot of people in this audience not only loving art, but had experience and pleasure going to the studio of the artists. Because if you like artists, and artist is alive and well, and in your city, not to see his or her studio, it just cut yourself 50% down from all possible pleasures. So do you allow people to see not only a final result of your working, but the very process how these costumes are made, because that is not part of the video. And I want to know a little bit, if you're comfortable to talk about that,
Well,
how
I
you
think,
make them.
You know, what was part of that particular video was me sort of showing you how a soundsuit is made, built. Not made, but built. But, you know, occasionally, if, you know, I will let you come into the studio.
Okay,
you know.
you're witnesses. He allows me to come to his
I mean,
studio.
you know, I'm open to that, but, you know, I think the studio is a very sort of private sort of space
Absolutely,
that,
absolutely.
you know, a lot of sort of failure happens in the studio. And that is really sort of the beginning of ideas, and it's my own sort of, I think that's the only space that I have for myself.
Now, what I didn't know, and I read about it in a few articles about you, I was just preparing. Because looking at your costumes, especially costumes which you were making about 10 years ago, they're less dramatic than what you've been showing in your recent works. And I never knew that the whole idea of these costumes was initiated by the tragic events of 1992 with Rodney King, beating Rodney King. And do you want to tell us about this connection? Because I find it very important and very fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, during that particular sort of moment in time, you know, for me as a black male, it was really, really difficult for me. I think for me it was sort of just trying to understand where my privacy lied, and to feel that I wasn't safe outside of the privacy of my home, to be profiled. there was just all of these things going through my head. And then, you know, I'm not sure, I don't know what this feeling is, but to feel discarded, to feel less than, devalued. And so I was in the park one day and I happened to look down and there was this twig. And that twig was the sort of instigator for the first Soundsuit. It was completely, so I proceeded to collect all the twigs in the park, went home and built this sculpture. I wasn't thinking about that I could wear it. But then I realized that I could wear it. And then I started to move in it, and it made sound. So that was really how Soundsuit sort of came about. And moving and making sound led me to think about the role of protest. And you know, what are ways in which we can be heard and to communicate. So, and then also that twig also led me down this path of discarded materials, which really was, again, the sort of breadth of how the vast amount of Soundsuits are created.
Would you be upset or even offended if some of the people who don't know this story will look at your costumes, your sculptures, your three-dimensional paintings, the way now I want to see them, and they will not get this kind of dramatic and painful history of the beginning of the process, what it means for you?
No, it doesn't. No, because I think that there is a sort of very peculiar image there. It's neither this or that. It's seductive, it's luring, but it's very much dark and something other. And so I think those are the things that are important. It's that it's an object that sort of lures you in to sort of investigate a deeper sort of connection.
Nick, I want to quote you, not precisely, but that's how I found in one of the articles, and it just stuck with me. I am an artist with a civic responsibility. There is an urgency I feel as an artist, as an African-American man, as a citizen. Lives matter, not just black lives, all lives matter. This is quite a statement. And now that I read about that and I meet you, I know that looking and enjoying in your painting, your costume, sound costume, your dancing costumes, I will have extra dimension in my emotional experience. The way I do remember as a little boy I grew up in the Soviet Union, talking about ancient history, and I had the privilege to live in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. And my parents took me to museum one rainy day because nothing better to do. And I found myself at the age of 5 at the Hermitage Museum, looking at Greek and Roman sculptures, and 2 or 3 weeks later, my mother, it's another Sunday, looking at me and said, "Oh, Edward, you've been a good boy last few days, so do you want to choose where to go?" And I said, "Yes, let's go where naked men and women standing." When you're 5 years old, how can you describe sculptures of Greek and Roman gods? Okay, that's how. And definitely I enjoyed without knowing anything about that. And later I learned Greek mythology, Greek religion, and with your work, I don't want to compare it with the Greek gods, but to a certain extent, first of all, it just appealed to me. It was interesting. I've heard the voices in movement, and now I'm just learning more and more. But what's interesting that when a couple of years ago you had a huge exhibition in Massachusetts, yes? And the cavernous space which is size of the football field. You couldn't get away with making dozens and dozens of costumes. You have to do something totally different. You have to go from just making short story, so to speak, artistic, writing the whole novel. So, and it was the first time that I opened catalog, and I was just ready to kill myself that I didn't have a chance to see it, because it's absolutely fabulous, like stepping in the middle of the opera.
It opens in Australia in
Are you inviting us to go with you to Australia?
November 24th, so you can come there.
But how, do you want to tell a little bit about this project?
Well, you know, that project, which was interesting because Denise Marconish, the curator, came to my studio and invited me to do this exhibition there. And so she said, we want you to do this exhibition in Gallery 5. There's only one stipulation, no Soundsuits. And I was like, yes. Because I was already in that sort of, I was already sort of transitioning out of that sort of way of working. Because it's important to just keep moving and keep exploring.
So you didn't want to become as famous as Jeff Koons and continue to do more and more and
Well, I
more
want to
costumes.
become that famous, but in multiple ways. And so she then left and said, I'll be back in a year. And, you know, so she gave me a year to sort of think about the project. And I really wasn't thinking about it much because I was doing other things, but I knew she was coming maybe in 3 months, let's say. And Freddie Gray had just happened, that incident. And I remember being in the studio and I was working on a piece and the thought came to mind, is there racism in heaven? And so that was the instigator that sort of led that project. And so that crystal cloudscape that sort of hovers in the air was built around that statement.
Do you mind if I ask you a personal question?
Can you whisper it in my ear? That's fine, whatever.
Hearing you and learning about you and looking at your art, I just wonder, your background, your childhood, right now, are you a religious person or not?
Am I what?
Are you practicing any religion?
No.
Because the way you...
Well, wait a minute. No. But I'm a messenger first and artist second.
What does it mean?
Being a messenger? That I'm just here to deliver these deeds and I go on to the next assignment. That's what it means.
But do you think that every successful artist, in a way, when I say successful, I don't mean the artist who just selling his or her works. I mean the artists who establish contact with the audience following you, listening to you. Do you think that Michelangelo or Van Gogh were
I don't
messenger
know.
first and artist
I'm
second?
not, I don't know. I can
think-
only sort of respond to myself. But
For me, just with my experience dealing with such a diversity of the art, that famous dead artist, well-known, young, still functioning artist, for me, artists are messengers, and messengers artists. And I never thought it's possible to separate one from another. So, and I know that I found your quote, I think I'm a messenger first and an artist second. Definitely that's how you see yourself. I have to admit that every successful and accomplished artist, and definitely you're accomplished, successful artist, and beyond that, for me, you are both messenger and artist, and I'm so curious to hear from you what you're saying. And another quote of yours, which appealed to me so much, I'm a messenger who brings people together to heal through art. That I completely understand and completely agree with. But very few people would have guts to say that.
Why?
Because they would be judged.
I think, I feel that, as I tell my students that that's the one thing that we have to sort of come to terms with, is that regardless if you want to be criticized or not, being an artist, you are, not by choice. So, but I don't really, that is really not important to me.
Now, because I have very often privilege to observe artists, how they work in the studio, I just wonder, obviously, considering the size of some of these installations, you're working with a whole team of people.
Mm-hmm.
Are you comfortable to talk about that?
Sure.
Tell us about.
Well, I work with about 10 artists. Mm-hmm. They all are artists as well. And so they understand what it takes to sort of work in a studio. We're in a building that's called Facility, which is a project space that myself and my partner Bob Faust have created. And it's a building that facilitates projects and supports young people, creative people, and artists. But it's also a studio space that houses my studio, Bob Faust's design studio, my brother Jack Cave studio. And so it's, and we're surrounded by art. I'm also a collector, so.
What kind of art do you collect?
Contemporary.
By variety of the artists?
Yeah, variety.
Are you familiar with Los Angeles, one of the best known Los Angeles and American artists? She's only 92 years young, Betty Saar.
Yeah.
She is absolutely amazing artist. And looking at some of your artworks, I couldn't help myself to see kind of echo her works. Mm-hmm. Though definitely being just only 30 plus years older and wiser than you are, yes. And she grew up in a totally different environment, culturally, historically. Her works mostly on a small scale.
Yeah.
But this is a short stories telling a big, short artworks with big stories. Your works, what I like about them, it's a combination of short stories and the whole novel. Because some of this installation, it's like a 100-page novel that you go and you see another character and they talk to each other. I understand that when you've been doing exhibition at Massachusetts, curator told you she doesn't want to have any suits, and you were happy not to have suits, yes?
Very.
But it seems like that's the first thing that people learn about you, and if they want to go further, they learn about many other aspects. I have no problem if you continue to do suit, because seeing hundreds of pages, they are dramatically different. It's not the same thing. It's not the same Jeff Koons, another shiny bubble.
Right. Well, I mean, maybe eventually later, but right now, I must keep things moving. I must, I've got an exhibition that opens in 10 days
Where?
in New York.
Are we invited?
You're invited at Jack Shaman Gallery, November 1st. And it's pretty much all bronze.
It's the first time that you cast your costumes in bronze, or
It's not my costumes.
what is that?
It's work, figurative work that's, it's not, it's sculptural work. I think the important thing is that, what's important is that, it's really sort of transferring the essence of like what's in a sound suit over to this new way of thinking and making. So it's not, when you look at this new work, it really looks like it's my work. And so I think that what is important is that, how do you sort of transfer the essence and still maintain this sort of same sort of sensibility and approach to building the work, and still talking about very sort of social sort of commentary around gun violence, and particularly this show titled If a Tree Falls, looking at black on black crime. But it's very, very sad work, but it's very optimistic at the same time.
But you see, that's how I experience your artworks, which I knew before and became aware through the catalogs and this video of yours. They are sad. The way you arrived and you just traveled through emotional, physical experience, it was a painful journey, but the result has some kind of positive message. And I also became aware only through the photographs in a catalog of the so-called tondo paintings. And tondo is a term that comes from the medieval Italy, where some of the religious paintings were, on rare occasions, painted in circles. And it's a very difficult composition to make it, to resolve it properly. So when I look at this large tondo embroidery, wall-bound, some of them 7, 10, 9, 10 feet wide, I couldn't help myself to say, hell, this is a painting. And you are not painting with a brush, you're painting. Now I'm just looking at you like my Jewish mother saying, so how come that you never did a painting? Or have you done any paintings? I see the painting there.
Okay. But what is that? What is the painting do I see it as a painting?
Have you
I
ever-
see it as a painting.
Because you've done seemingly everything that artists would do, with the exception of taking brush.
Yeah, I don't think
and-
I have taken a brush, it's just in a different form.
But you've never been tempted or interested to do more traditional painting, to
No,
experience?
not right now.
Okay, I will
Maybe later. But no, I don't think it's really something, I don't think my work at this moment asks for that.
There is such a variety of your works that I will be not surprised to see anything in any time soon, and I wonder that any major museum in California, I know that you had big exhibition in San Francisco and Buena Vista, and I read that you have your artworks, your art, in dozens of major museums, and I'm kind of still surprised that here we have you talking about your art, but we don't have your art to look at. So it seems like California is a little bit behind the...
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on the West Coast.
So ladies and gentlemen, we have just to push our buttons and just to do something about that. And so I believe that it's a time for us to ask for Q&A. Is it time? Yes.
Looking back on
there's an arc. In what way?
Did you start at a particular place and then continue to expand it, or is there a through line, I guess, is what I'm asking, and that you are moving in a particular direction? You sort of experimented with developing form, and then you move to another form to develop, but there is a narrative, similar narrative throughout, is my question.
Yeah, I think there's a similar sort of narrative. I think the main sort of similar sort of device is, I think it was 92 when, I thought I was awake, my consciousness, but obviously it wasn't until the Rodney King incident happened. So that certainly is this sort of narrative, just this sort of, work that sort of built around the social sort of commentary and the political sort of climate. That's what fuels the work, but I think it's really the sort of the way in which the work is built. I think, it's the hand. It's very important that there is the hand as part of the expression in my work.
Your hand.
My hand, assistance, my hand. And so I'm interested in the sort of the physical, the sort of visceral sort of qualities that that is very much part of building the work. And I'm very interested in this sort of idea of something other, that, that you look at the work and it's something other that you can't sort of place it anywhere, that you've got to be open to what it provides and what it's presenting.
When you talked earlier that your work was about healing, were you talking about healing yourself or healing others?
No, not myself, others. And it's not really, it's really about sort of, how can we as creative people, what are our roles and responsibilities in terms of being sort of proactive and ways of finding common ground, and so what are the tools, what are the methods in which we can sort of come together and create projects that unify us in vast ways. And the interesting thing about that is that, when I go into communities to work, I really have no idea I know what the outcome must be, but I have no idea what the process is going to be on that journey. And that's where the most incredible work happens, is in this sort of process. So what you see as the end result is not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in how we arrived to that place.
Hi, Nick.
Hi.
I'm here.
Oh, okay. I'm like,
Hi. It's okay. Thank you for being here.
Sure.
And I want to go back to what you said about you being a messenger. And can you talk a little bit about that? Are there particular messages that come to you that you want to express? Are you looking for a message in the work? Do you have a message for us? All those kind of things. If you could talk about that a little bit.
not really, because I don't know. I've accepted that what I'm here to do. It's not clear why, but that's what I'm put on the earth to do. I can't pinpoint it in terms of how it's, it's not scriptive, it's very organic, and it's just me sort of coming to terms with what my responsibilities are as a human being.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
So there is no doubt that the African American man is under siege in this country and has been for decades, hundreds of years. And there is no doubt that it is often a miracle in my mind when I see an African American man reach any kind of maturity and walk around free. When I look at your early Soundsuit and I hear your story about Rodney King, I can't help but wonder, is any of the building of those Soundsuits about protection and the ability to protect yourself in a way that you're not being discovered as who you are?
Yeah, I think it's sort of, for me, it's hiding gender, race, class, forcing you to look at something without judgment. That's really, once it sort of conceals the body. So definitely. I don't know who, but.
I have to tell you, I am crazy about your work. I saw
Thank you.
it in St. Louis, so that's my only experience of the St. Louis show. And I disagree completely with Professor Goldman. I think your work is 100% the opposite of painting. It is, as sculpture, it is dancing. The Soundsuits, to me, I saw them and loved them, but needed to see them dance. As a student of, as Catherine Dunn's company, I crave to see them move. The white with the tube that they would look. People who were standing next to me, we blew on them to try and see if we had a little bit of air movement to feel them move.
In the exhibition, you blew on them?
It is so stunning that you, and I have to tell you, you are the king of Unga Pachka. So to me, I don't know the dark side of it, I know the playful side. My experience was also children that were being dragged around by a mom, that walked into the space and they were like ready to go for ice cream or something, and they did not know what to make of it. And I started to say to them, look at this, what do you see? What do you see? And all of a sudden their eyes, their life was changed because they were trying to see. There was so much to see. And it's so rich, and the exhibit and so beautiful, and so moving, literally moving, that I don't see it as a painting. And I just want to tell you how much I
Thank you.
appreciate it, and I love it. And so I don't understand how that playful part and the dancing part is so part of the piece of their life.
I want to share with you, but don't tell anyone. When I went to see his exhibition at the Fowler Museum, I blew in the costumes myself.
That's funny.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm so nervous.
Don't be. Do I need to hold your hand?
That would be so nice. No, I'll stay here though. It's okay. So I'm ashamed to say I haven't seen your work that's coming out in the new show, but you spoke about it having sadness, but also like this message of happiness, if that's correct. And you said, the fact that you said happiness and sadness together just made me want to know for your experience, how do you find happiness? And like, where do you see it? And how does that motivate you to make art? Because that's something I struggle with in art making, getting discouraged.
Oh, let's see. I think I think, I just bought a building. It's called Facility, and the fact that we can program projects in the space, where we can work with the local high schools, where we can give artists opportunities that have not had that opportunity to know that I'm in this sort of space that I can do whatever I want in it. It's like 20,000 square feet. And I can dream and I can imagine, and it's mine. And I am very liberated there. And that, I want to sort of use it as a place of service. So I think that's really what, and that, I've chosen to design my life. I mean, I think as creative people, we can do that. Yes, I've had jobs. I've had to get a job to survive. That's beside the point. But I also knew how to come home and turn my living room into a studio and maintain my creative practice. So I think it's these sort of things that you have to do to, it's about nurturing and yourself, and what do you need to fuel your soul and to keep it in a place. It takes a lot of work just to be. But I think the most important thing is being in silence every day for at least 1 hour. I think if we did that every day, we would live in the world differently. Because I don't think we spend enough time discovering who we are. We're so consumed by this phone and TV but do we really give ourselves time to be? And that's where, your truth is, so.
Hello. I would like to know more about this building.
Word.
Hello. This building that you have with these other artists, your collection, your interaction with the community, how does it work? I think that's very interesting, that place of creativity, but also engaging these other artists and creators.
How does it work? Yeah. How does it work? I think it's through invitations. If it's, I think I would sort of talk about a project that I did in Shreveport, Louisiana, which I'm sort of like, what am I going there? Why? But it was so incredible. And so I did this project in Shreveport with the Arts Council there. And so when I went there, I also spent maybe a couple of days just scouting the sort of city and the community and just sort of seeing, what's here, what's around. And I found where the Arts Center was on the edge of sort of downtown was also a series of social services. And so I was interested in those in relationship to this sort of project and started to think about creating a project where they could be involved. And these social services were organizations that were, one was for better mothers and their children, sort of a safe haven space for them. One was for those living with HIV. One was those with mental disabilities. And so I sort of created a project where I sort of hired local artists to be artists in residence within these social services, and we built a project that sort of involved them in addition to working with the local gospel choir, some spoken word artists, and we start to then, and so then I come and I'm in residence for maybe a month, could be 2 months, and we start to then build the project. So it's really me sort of pulling up my sleeves and getting in on the grounds and sort of seeking out, again, what's important is that, I have an opportunity to sort of establish a platform for others and for them and for someone to think about the ideas of what's possible. There's so many creative people that don't know what's possible for them or have not had that sort of platform to stand on to see what's possible. And so it's really about that and sort of working with communities and teams and people that can get behind an idea.
Nick, if you don't mind, I want to ask you a question. Among the artists, who are the artists who have particular impression on you or just influence on you through the years?
I think the only sort of artist that made me cry when I saw their work was Kiefer. And I was 18 years old.
Anselm Kiefer.
Yeah. And that was really sort of the first time I was in a museum. And I just started to bawl. And so it was that moment where I was like, whoa, art can make you do this?
Do you want to tell us about any particular, it was a painting or sculpture or the whole exhibition?
It was painting, but I'm not a painter. Yeah, it was, it was really sort of the scale of the work and the sort of the content.
And moodiness of his paintings. Most of his paintings are referencing the World War II and tragedy and death. And it's the most profound, the most unsettling paintings. And if you see his painting or sculpture, you cannot, whether you like it or not, you cannot forget it. I am very intrigued by what you're saying. And if we are not talking about visual art, what influence on you, on your art, movies, literature, music?
I think it's like everything. I think it's how I choose to sort of live in the world, eyes wide open. It's like if I'm in Senegal, it's, I get an urban city, but I'm more interested in the rural communities and what that has to offer and what that looks like, feels like, and just being open to, that's the food, that's what feeds me to sort of engage in this space and place in my mind.
So when you grew up as a child or teenager, did you have any experience of seeing art, going to museums in Chicago?
No, not as a teenager. I grew up with 7 brothers, all 1 year apart. I was just hanging out and playing with them, sports, whatever. But I was surrounded by creative people. I was surrounded by, my mother comes from a family of 16, so there was amazing craftsmen, there was amazing makers in the family, so it's not that I wasn't aware and sort of around makers that made things with their hands. And it's not that I would just sort of, I may be hanging out with my brothers, but I would be looking over my shoulders at these sort of talented sort of individuals that
So
were.
what was the response of your mothers or your brothers or your family
To my
when
work?
when they see that you are becoming artists, or how you can just support yourself? Because
You know, it's interesting because I remember, you know, probably my really first major exhibition. You know, my brothers are calling me. You know, every time they call, what are you doing? I'm in the studio. I'm in the studio. And I'm thinking, oh my God, don't I have anything else to say to them? But it was, but the moment that they arrived to the exhibition, they all just started crying because they understood what that meant. You know, and then, you know, it's like, sometimes I don't think that they really sort of understand, like when I'm in the studio, I'm really in the studio. You know, they don't know the seriousness of it until they actually see it, and then they're like, whoa. You know, in order for this to even sort of arrive in the world, there's a level of commitment that is sort of so extreme. And so, you know, it's that, you know, they're like extremely supportive. You know, they get it. They get what they get. I don't know if they get it, but I'm amazed how much they know how to talk about it. And so it's really, you know, the love and the respect, and it's there, and so it's great.
I was not planning to tell it to you, but now hearing this story about your family, my both parents, who are not with us any longer, they had a terribly difficult, tragic experience during the World War II. My father from Poland, my mother from Russia. My father, at 19 years old, was arrested and sent to Gulag in Siberia. And he was only 19 years old, arrested as a Polish bourgeois spy. Don't even ask, there's no logic in that. And one of the guards in the prison found out that my father is trained as a woman's tailor. You know, I so much loved to take my father to see. He was not very well educated, but he had wonderful eyes and wonderful hands. And when I would take him to see any exhibition with the fabric and the costumes, he would look at that, and I said, you cannot touch it, it's a museum, but he wanted to see all the seams. And when I look at the artworks, which has this kind of sense of making it together, because whoever just help you, you know, it's done together. So one of the guards, finding that my father is a tailor, ladies' tailor, said, can you do it, kind of winter coat for my wife? And my father said, I cannot do it. It's so, you are keeping us freezing in the forest to cut these trees every day for 15 hours. My hands are not moving. God told him, I'll keep you inside, which was already a huge difference. And my father made a coat for this woman, wife of this, and she was short and kind of plumpy. As a result, she was looking a little bit taller and a little bit thinner. And when she started to wear this winter coat, every wife of every other guard demanded that my father would do just things. As a result, he survived. People say, was he paid? I said, royally. He was paid with his life. And when the war was over, and he ended up meeting my mom and moving to St. Petersburg, he became one of the best-known women's clothing designers. So I have to tell you that I not only aesthetically appreciate your works, I feel kind of, I want to put my hands on your works, I want to touch them.
You can.
And okay, I'll just behind your back.
I will.
just touch
If you
it.
come to my studio, you can.
But it's amazing when how much you're putting emotions and experience in your artworks, which can be, so to speak, understood on different level. But I don't think that anyone in the audience can look at your works and just to pass by without paying attention. You see your works, you stand up, you stare at them, they're capturing you. they're holding your attention. They have magic. You're a magician.
Thanks.
So I think that one more time, Nick, thank you for coming to Southern California.
Sure.
And thank you for invitation to go with you to Australia. Okay, I'll think about that. Okay. But please, 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 if any of the museums in Southern California approach you with their suggestions, say yes. Promise?
Okay, promise.
Promise. Okay, good.
Promise.